Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Big Fly Baseball Show. I am your host, Victor Rojas. So glad you can join us for episode number 3 of the Big Fly Baseball Show. I know that last week I did not fulfill my obligations, if you will, for producing a show, but I had a very good reason for it. We had a very, very busy week that included going out to Phoenix, Arizona, to attend to our daughter's graduation from Grand Canyon University. So that is the reason why I was not able to produce a show yesterday, or last week, I should say. And I feel bad about it, but then again, I don't really, just because it was family and it was great to be out there with the entire family, minus my son, who's still off at college in Tennessee. But it was great to have to see the graduation, the ceremony, and everything, and see the beautiful smile on my daughter Mattingly's face, getting her Bachelor of Arts in Communications from GCU, and doing it in 3 years. So kudos to her. Cheers to Mattingly and to the family for getting that accomplishment. Now she's off to continuing her internship with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So that's the reason why I didn't have an episode 3 last week, but we will have an episode 3 this week, and hopefully I make up for it. So if this is the first time you've tuned in to the podcast, welcome. I am Victor, your host. I did about 18 years as a Major League Baseball announcer. Most of the time was with the Los Angeles Angels for 11 seasons, but I also spent time with the Diamondbacks, Rangers, and MLB Network along the way. And then before that and after that, I was working in front offices throughout various sports, including minor league baseball. So that's just kind of me. I grew up in the game of baseball, love the game. Not thrilled with a lot of the things that are going on in it today, but it is what it is. And that's why we're here for the podcast, is to kind of just give you my 2 cents of what's going on in the world of baseball. Typically, what I like to do is just kind of go through some things that happened in the previous week and discuss them. And, just like I said, I'm not an individual that likes to force my opinion on people. I accept others' opinion for what it is. It's their opinion. And I just like to say what's going on in my mind as I see and read and feel things throughout Major League Baseball, as well as the collegiate level. And that's what this podcast is for. You can find us on any of the streaming platforms, obviously, for podcasts. And we also put the video up for YouTube on the Big Fly Baseball Show channel on YouTube. So that's kind of the synopsis of where we're at for episode 3 and some of the topics that I'd love to talk about in today's show. Oh, by the way, before I forget, this is not a pre-packaged show where there's no time limits. Sometimes I'll go a little long, sometimes I'll go a little bit shorter. It all kind of just goes and depends on what I'm feeling that day and how the conversation with myself goes, if that makes any sense. But sometimes I can go down a little bit of a rabbit hole in discussing certain things, and therefore we end up having a little bit longer show. But for the most part, I like to be as concise as possible, get you in and out of here as quickly as possible so that you can go about your day listening to other podcasts or whatever the case may be. So a happy Monday to everyone. Glad you're here to join us for this show. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the American League West, also talk a little bit about the American League Central, the White Sox especially finally getting off the schneid and no longer being the worst team in baseball. The uniform debacle that just the never-ending uniform debacle that it seems to be taking place in Major League Baseball. Touch on that, and then kind of wrap things up on a little bit of a high note, and going down to the collegiate ranks and talking about a particular individual who's having a phenomenal season, and I think it's something that worth talking about. So that is kind of the gist of the show, and we'll see how it goes. But as we start this new week, I typically like to go through where the standings are and where teams are at. I mentioned the American League West that I'm going to touch on. It is the Seattle Mariners that leads that division by a half game over the Rangers. In the American League East, the Yankees continue to play good baseball. They played very good baseball, especially offensively, against the Milwaukee Brewers this past weekend. They've got a game advantage on the Baltimore Orioles. The Cleveland Guardians, a 2.5 game advantage on the Kansas City Royals in the American League Central. In the National League, it's the Braves at 19-7, have a 1.5 game lead over the Phillies. The Brewers leading that Central Division by a 0.5 game over the Cubs. Brewers at 17-10, the Cubbies at 17-11, and of course the Dodgers ended up losing yesterday to the Toronto Blue Jays, but took the series. They're now 18-12. They've got themselves a 3.5 game advantage in the National League West. So that's the synopsis of what the standings look like going into this week. And not a whole lot of surprises going on there. I think that the Dodgers are starting to get their footing a little bit in the from the pitching perspective. The offense, you knew that was going to be able to put up runs. Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani just having phenomenal starts to their seasons, and they're going to put up a ton of runs. But we'll see how the rest of that division plays out, because the Diamondbacks have had to deal with some injuries. The Padres have just been okay. But anyway, like I said, I digress, and I typically do for whatever reason. So I apologize ahead of time. But let's focus in a little bit on the American League West. A couple of weeks ago on the, I do another podcast that's Angels centric called Angels Win Podcast. I said that the American League West is a mid-division. And I said that because I think it is. I don't think there's any one particular team that is going to run away with the division. Now, that being said, I felt early on that the Houston Astros were the team to beat. I think everybody felt that just because of the fact that the quote unquote dynasty that they've had, if you will, that includes 2 world championships over the last 7-8 seasons. The core of the offensive side remaining intact. And even though that Dusty Baker had departed and had some ton of injuries to the pitching staff, that this was going to be the team to beat. And still, even though the Texas Rangers won the world championship last year, the World Series, that it was still kind of the Astros division. Rangers right there in second place, or right, butting up against it. Seattle still trying to figure out what kind of team they're going to have if they can put it all together. And the Angels, the A's, and so on and so forth. So it hasn't played out that way. As we mentioned, the Seattle Mariners are the one that are leading the division just ahead of the Rangers, but there's no real separation. There's no feel or sense of a team starting to separate. The Astros really are the interesting team in that, as bad as they are right now, they're in last place in the American League West at 10-19. They did just take 2 of 3 from the Colorado Rockies while playing in Mexico. But their run differential is minus 22 at the start of this week. And it's really been the injuries that they've had to the pitching staff. That and some obvious issues with the back end of the bullpen and the blown saves that they've had. So, when you've got a staff ERA north of 5, plus you've got the blown saves, it's not going to bode well for you. Now, that being said, with Justin Verlander coming back and Framber Valdez coming back, if those guys are able to pitch to what they're capable of doing or have been able to do in years past, they should be okay and should be able to turn things around. I just still think that the offense is still trying to find its footing. And I know there's been a lot of discussion online as to the lineup construction of that club, with a friend of mine, Jeremy Booth, really adamant about making sure that Yordan Alvarez is in the number 3 spot and not the number 2 spot, so that there's more RBI opportunities. But whatever the case is for the Houston Astros, they're going to have to do something and try to figure it out. And now's the time to do it. You might as well start screwing around with the lineup a little bit so that you can figure out what it is you do have and or need if you're going to make a run in the American League West. Now, I said they're 10-19 to start the week. And because nobody's really running away with the West, there is still plenty of time for the Astros. But it just seems like for the first time in a long time, that they can be knocked down, and they're having a little bit of trouble getting back up. And so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out as the season progresses. The Rangers are and have had some issues as well with the injuries. Obviously, Josh Young is going to be out for some time, the third baseman. They've had some injuries on the pitching side as well. Dane Dunning had a terrific outing on Sunday and wrapping up that series. Wyatt Langford hit his first major league home run, an inside the park job, by the way. And I think they're going to be all right. I just think that, like I said, with the early season struggles as we wrap up the month of April, that they'll be able to kind of figure things out and be kind of on their way. Now, obviously, having won a World Series last year and the wherewithal to go out and plug holes as needed as we get into the summer and into the trade deadline, the Rangers certainly have that ability. So I'm not overly concerned about the Rangers. I think they will get sorted, but right now it's kind of just a mixed bag in that West, and that's why I said it's a mid division. The Angels, typically I hold off talking about the Angels because I do so much of it on the other podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you just saw me take a swig of water, so I'm preparing myself for an Angels, I don't know, diatribe, I guess. No, not really. Look, it's been an awful stretch of baseball for the Angels. I know that the Angels faithful are more of a glass half full bunch than a lot of fan bases. They don't want to believe that there should be in a rebuild or going to be in a rebuild, or they'd have no chance in the American League West. Well, especially the way the playoffs are set up now, where you have ample opportunities to at least get your foot in the door, if you will. The problem with the Angels right now is that they're incredibly inconsistent from an offensive perspective, from a pitching perspective. There are issues that I've talked about ad nauseum for a number of years. The fact that they don't have starters that go deep into games, and therefore you put the onus on the bullpen. Perry Manassian, their GM, this past offseason, decided to go in that route of building out the bullpen. And truth be told, it is kind of the right way of doing it. So that, and I mean that from the standpoint of that, if you're not going to go out and spend money on top tier pitching, then and you're going to stick with your 5 or 6 guys that you think are going to be in that rotation, and you know that the bulk of those 5 or 6 guys, pretty much all of them, are not deep into games starters, then you need to have a bullpen that soaks up the innings and can bridge you to whomever's going to be closing that particular night. And so I understood the assignment that Perry had this past offseason. But just like anything else, you go with bullpens, and bullpens can be fickle. It doesn't matter what happens, in the previous year with a particular bullpen arm. You just never know. And the Angels are finding that out. Obviously, the inconsistency that they've had, the injury to Stevenson, who's not going to be out for the rest of the year, it puts an onus on the guys that are left in the bullpen, plus the guys that are down in the minor leagues. And so while they do have some guys that are coming back, I just don't know. And this was my issue coming into the season, is the fact that their offense was going to be enough. Taylor Ward's having a nice start to the season. Mike Trout's had a nice start to the season, although his hitting with men in scoring position is not where it needs to be for a guy leading the team on the offensive side of things. The injury to Anthony Rendon, hamstring injury, is going to keep him out for an extended period of time. I believe there's a partial tear. So that's just another blow for Rendon and the Angels on the offensive side. Not that he had gotten it going offensively, but you if you're an Angel fan, you're looking forward to hopefully him playing a full season and contributing. That obviously is not going to be the case. Joe Adell's had some really bad mental mistakes, both on the base paths as well as defensively. And you can go on and on and on. And then you've got the young guys that are still trying to figure out who they are and what they are at the major league level in Sean Noel at first base, Neto at short, O'Hoppe behind the plate. So you've got this kind of weird conundrum of where this Angels team is at. They're almost like in this purgatory state of what is the identity of this ball club? And I don't think it has one. And I think that's the problem. And I think that's where Angel fans are starting to get a little frustrated. And we'll see what happens. I still think the world of Ron Washington's put together a really good coaching staff, but the defensive side still kind of rearing its ugly head in the most not the most opportune times, and they're going to have a really tough go of this if they don't figure this out. They had a team meeting after the game on Sunday. They got swept by the Minnesota Twins over the weekend, and handily so. But that's their second team meeting since the start of the season, and that usually doesn't bode well. And then they got the Philadelphia Phillies rolling into town for a series this week. So it only gets more difficult for the Angels. And then in the wrapping out the American League West, the Oakland Athletics, they've played some much better baseball of late, more inspired baseball. I think having their closer Mason Miller and the start that he's off to this year has just been phenomenal. This is a guy that started last year as a starter and then ended up missing 4 months of the season due to a UCL strain in his elbow. And they put him in the back end of that bullpen for the Athletics, and he's been ridiculous. Average fastball over 100 miles per hour, swing and miss rate of 50%. He's a guy that it's not just touching 100, he's kind of sitting at 100. And it's been fun to watch. You worry with all of the injuries that we continue to see on the pitching side with a guy that has had a sprained UCL last year. The concern of, getting excited about the triple digits and living at 100 miles per hour and putting that strain on the elbow. So we'll see how that plays out. But hopefully it goes his way, because it's fun to see stories like this evolve, where guys come out of nowhere or reinvent themselves like Mason has, and we'll see how it plays out in 2024. So that's my 2 cents on the American League West. In the Central, I mentioned the Minnesota Twins sweeping the Los Angeles Angels over the weekend. Now they've got a 7-game win streak. It's their longest win streak in 13 years. And it's given them the opportunity to get to 4th place in the American League Central. That's right. The American League Central, the division that everyone says is winnable by any team, and typically is currently winnable by any team. The Guardians at 19-9, the Royals at 17-12, Tigers at 16-12, Twins with that 7-game win streak are now 14-13, and then the lowly White Sox at 6-22. The Twins have used the long ball quite a bit, especially of late, especially over the weekend against the Angels. So it's fun to watch this kind of division unfold. Mentioned that, I think 2 episodes ago, about the Royals, and having grown up in Kansas City, how excited I am about this Royals team and their potential. They're still 5 games over 500. No one's really giving them a shot. This Central Division is going to be a lot of fun. The White Sox were the worst team in baseball, and they will continue to struggle, especially with the run differential where they're at. They're minus 77 in run differential, but they just did sweep the Tampa Bay Rays. So just think about that for a second, how how unique the game of baseball is that you can have, and it's true, on any given day you can be the best team in baseball, and it's mind-boggling at times to try to figure out how one team can beat another. But the Tampa Bay Rays aren't the Tampa Bay Rays of yesteryear. It's a team that is at the bottom of the American League East, 3 games under 500. They are minus 32 as far as the run differential. And they're just not your uncle's Tampa Bay Rays. I watched them a couple of weeks ago when they played the Angels or hosted the Angels, and they just look like a different team. And it'll be interesting to see if they're able to correct it and fix it like they have in years past. But it's a different team and a much deeper division than in years past. But that's the American League, and I'm talking about the White Sox. So kudos to the White Sox. I felt bad for Pedro Grifol, their manager, because he's just dealing with what he has. And Chris Getz, a former big leaguer who's now the new general manager of the White Sox, they've got their hands full, not only this year but going forward. At 6-0, and I think they're Jerry Reinsdorf, their owner, wants a new ballpark on the south side. So good luck with that. But at 6-22, they're bringing up the rear of the American League Central. And it's funny that nobody really talks about the Cleveland Guardians, especially with Bieber being gone for the rest of the year, having to have surgery, how other guys have stepped up. But they're 10 games over 500. Pardon me. 10 games over 500. They're 19-9. And Stephen Vogt, their new skipper, is doing a really nice job of pushing the right buttons. And we'll see how the Guardians end up playing out in the American League Central the rest of the way. Let's touch a little bit on this uniform debacle that's going on. If you recall, in the spring, pictures started to come out of the uniforms when pitchers and catchers reported, because a couple of things where the emblem, the MLB emblem, was at, and it got moved. The names on the back of the jerseys were much smaller than in years past. Pants seemed to be see-through, if you will, which is not a great look. So there was a lot of hollering and hooping about it in spring training, and rightfully so. It just looked awful. There's a mismatching of grays, tops and bottoms. And with Nike being the uniform supplier of Major League Baseball, there obviously some issues that were brought out. Fanatics was getting crushed, and just so everyone is aware of it, of the situation. And we go back in time. Majestic was the uniform provider going back from 2005 until Nike took over. In 2016, not many people remember that Under Armour signed, or was prepared to sign, I believe they signed, a 10-year deal with Major League Baseball to become the uniform supplier of all the teams. And that was supposed to kick into effect in 2020. In 2018, the business changed for Under Armour, and they decided to pull out, and Major League Baseball decided to pull out of the deal. And that's how Nike stepped into it and took over the uniform rights for Major League Baseball. Last summer in Seattle at the All-Star Game, there was this new technology that Nike was trotting out, and that was the All-Star Game uniforms. And there apparently was very positive feedback to these uniforms that were going to be used on a full-time basis in 2024, beginning this spring. Well, clearly something happened from the uniforms that players liked and approved and were okay with in Seattle last year at the All-Star Game to what was unveiled in 2024. was not what everyone was expecting. Let's just put it that way, right? A lot of people were upset, especially players talking about it. But anyway, moving forward, Rob Manfred had to, come out with his quotes in spring training. Both Nike and Fanatics were getting crushed. Fanatics more so because Nike is the one that designed and engineered the uniform, the new uniform style. Fanatics is the manufacturer of the uniform. And so at some point, you have to have some sort of quality assurance. One would think you would have some sort of quality assurance to figure out, or checkpoints of, hey, this is good. This meets the standards. Just, I would imagine there has to be, right? Somebody at Major League Baseball, somebody in licensing has to have had the sign off on these uniforms. Well, apparently that did not happen. And then last night on ESPN.com, Jeff Passan had an article where the Major League Baseball Players Association absolved Fanatics of the issue, of the debacle, if you will, and putting the onus of the situation squarely on the shoulders of Nike. Basically saying, I'm paraphrasing here, Nike trying to reinvent the wheel, something that didn't need to be reinvented. They tried to reinvent it, and obviously it's been a colossal failure. That said, they're supposed to get a new process in place, new uniforms in place, and at the very latest by the beginning of 2025. The interesting thing that comes out of all this, especially with the timing and I don't know, the wording of the press release, that it was, basically saying the PA Players Association saying Fanatics had nothing to do with this. This is not their fault. It's hard to read that and at the same time see a follow-up tweet saying that the MLBPA received $44 million in licensing revenue from Fanatics, which obviously, but also has a $13 million investment in Fanatics. So you wonder why this press release or this article and the quotes that came out basically saying, now Fanatics had nothing to do with it. Well, of course you're going to protect that entity that not only brings in revenue, but you also have an investment in. So we'll see how this all plays out. At the end of the day, it looks like the bigger names on the back of the uniforms are going to come back, which I think is huge. The cost of these jerseys are just ridiculous. And I think there's plenty of blame to go around. This isn't just a Nike thing or just a Fanatics thing or an MLB thing. I think they're all to blame. Major League Baseball should be to blame as part of this. Fanatics should be blamed for manufacturing this, and Nike for trying to reinvent the wheel. So I don't understand why one entity feels the need to point the finger at one particular piece of the pie, because everyone's involved in this. And I would imagine that the PA, not just Major League Baseball having an approval process, I'd imagine the PA signed off on the uniforms at some point. I can't imagine that the sign off happened in Seattle last year and you just left everybody say, yeah, we're good. We trust you. Go do what you do. But maybe that's exactly what happened. And that's why we're still talking about this. So that's the uniform debacle that came up. They will update the uniforms, bigger names, better materials, no more see-through pants, hopefully. And hopefully, really, primarily at a price point that's affordable for fans across the globe. The last thing I want to touch on is we're going to talk a little bit about this young man at the University of Georgia, and we're going to go to the amateur baseball side. Charlie Condon, outfielder, first baseman for the Bulldogs, or as they like to say in Georgia, the Dogs, DAWGS. It's a fascinating story in that he's a young man that grew up in Georgia, went to high school in Georgia, was a quarterback, baseball player, and ended up walking on. He wanted to go to UGA, walked on to the Bulldogs, ended up redshirting his freshman year in 2022. And then in his first full season of play, which would what they call a redshirt freshman year in 2023, was an absolute stud. I mean, he won the team's Triple Crown last year for the Bulldogs. Hit 385, had 25 home runs, and drove in 67 in his redshirt freshman season. And all he has done in his follow-up season, which is now his redshirt sophomore year, is just continue to go off. Over the weekend, he had a multi-homer game, ended up being his 28th and 29th home runs of the year. So, and he set two new UGA records: the single season home run record, which I would imagine he will continue to add to, but his 29th home run is the new single season home run record. Gordon Beckham, if you remember him, the former big leaguer with the White Sox. I think the White Sox drafted him as a shortstop out of UGA. He had the record, and also the career home run record. He's got 58 career home runs now as a member of the Bulldogs. He is averaging one home run every 5.76 at-bats, okay? Just to give you some perspective on that, one home run every 5.76 at-bats. The lowest mark in Major League Baseball's modern era was in 2001. That was Barry Bonds hit one every 6.52 at-bats. So that's how crazy a season Charlie Condon is having. 29 home runs in 43 games so far this year. And oh, by the way, he still leads all Division I hitters in batting average at 461. This kid is phenomenal, 21 years of age. He is draft eligible. He is more than likely going to be the number one overall pick of this summer's draft. And the Cleveland Guardians are on the clock with that number one pick. And I know there's a lot of talent out there at the collegiate level. I get an opportunity to call games for ESPN. As a matter of fact, my last one was a barn burner in College Station last Tuesday. It took almost 4 hours, University of Houston and the Aggies, and the Aggies picking up the victory, narrowly holding on. But there are so many great players in college baseball today. Charlie Condon right now is just head and shoulders and should be the 1-1 of this summer's draft. So kudos to him, and it's been fun to watch, and it's great stories like this where you see a kid. I have a son who's a freshman in college right now, baseball player, and to see guys like Charlie Condon, it goes from a walk-on to a redshirt season. It goes phenomenal. It just keeps getting better. Wyatt Langford was the same thing at the University of Florida, now at the major league level. It's just fun to watch these kind of stories unfold before your eyes, and I think it's important for fans to kind of hear about them. So that's going to do it for episode 3 of the Big Fly Baseball Show. Like I said, short and sweet, get you in and out of here. I thank you for listening and for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, remember you can listen to the podcast on any of the streaming services out there, or you can watch on the YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe and like as much as possible. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. We'll see you next week on Big Fly Baseball.